Right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third in this year's series of special webinars on sustainability in lighting. Today's event is organised by Recolight, the UK's leading compliance authority for the waste, electrical and electronic equipment regulations. I'm Remy Maloney. I'm the editor of the Circular Lighting Report, which is brought to you by Recolight, and I'm going to be your host for the next hour and a half or so. Now, today's webinar is entitled Making Cat A Fit Out Sustainable. Cat A fit outs have been an egregious problem, a standout problem for many decades in this industry, and we're going to look at some possible solutions and some ideas around that today. And as you can see, we have an excellent lineup of speakers from right across the supply chain. We have Flavie Laures, who's the sustainability champion at the finishes and interior sector, and Flavie is going to share some ideas and initiatives from that industry and maybe ideas that we could use in the lighting side. We also have May Fawzi, who's an interior architecture director at MF Design Studio in Guildford, and she'll be coming at it from the perspective of an architect. And then I'm also delighted to have our very own Francesca Cameron, who's collections development and the membership coordinator at Recolight. And we're also joined the panel by Nigel Harvey, who's the CEO of Recolight. So the agenda today, I'll give an introduction, set the scene. Flavie will, as I said, look at initiatives in the interiors industry. May will give interiors architecture perspective. I should have mentioned that May is the president-elect of the British Institute of Interior Design. And Francesca will look at closing the loop with a new initiative called Circular Place. And then we'll have a panel discussion. And at this stage, we'd invite any questions or comments that you have on this. Just pop them in the Q&A. So just a bit of housekeeping before we kick off. Today's session is going to be recorded. It will be posted on the Recolight event page. If you've registered for today, you will get the slides sent to you via MailChimp, probably tomorrow. And it says we'll finish at 12-ish. We actually finish probably around 12:30. So a couple of things. The chat box is really for things about for the webinar administrators, things about audio and issues about that you put in the chat box. And if you've got questions about the topic today, put them in the Q&A box, because that's the one that I'll be looking at and the panel will be looking at in terms of on the topic. So as I said, this is our third webinar this year. But so coming up on the 22nd of June, we have the waste regs and your responsibilities. And this is for manufacturers and importers and distributors. And we'll look at how you can stay compliant with the multifarious legislation around waste and importing, etc. So that's a date for your diary, 11 o'clock on Thursday, 22nd of June. Now, you can also look at all the previous webinars, and a lot of them are still very timely, still lots of great learnings in them. So I would recommend them to you. And they go right back to 2020, and you can see all of them, link to all of them on the website. And you can also fast forward and stop and just look at individual presentations as you wish. I always got great news that our big event, the Circular Lighting Live in September, the ticketing has just gone live for this, so you can ensure your place at I think it's the UK's biggest sustainable lighting event ever, basically. So, and we've moved venue. We're going to be at the Royal College of Physicians, just beside Regent's Park there. Wonderful, wonderful building and a great auditorium. There's a really nice big exhibition space. And we're delighted to be supported by so many of leading brands in the industry. They'll be there with their stands, and you can see lots of interesting innovations, materials, and new luminaires there. So Thursday, 21st September, that's our big event. So put that in your diary, live and in person. Also, I need to tell you that Simon Fisher, who's our luminaire design expert, will be giving his much acclaimed design workshops around the country. He will look at TM66 and how you design to get good metrics. So it's called Designing for a Circular Economy. It's basically a one-day CPD course, and it's generally limited to 12 people. So it could be people from other industry, other manufacturers, or you can do bespoke training sessions for one company. And I think the next one is on the 22nd of June, if I'm correct, Suzanne. And that clashes with the other event, but anyway, I'm sure that's all fine. So yeah, so 22nd of June in London, I believe. So go on the website.
It's the 21st, Ray. 21st.
Oh, right, 21st. Okay, so that's perfectly timed the day before. So 21st of June. And as I say, if you just go to the Recolight website, click on events, and the workshops are there. And also the circular lighting report also lives on the Recolight website. I'm the editor, and this is basically keeping track and abreast of developments in sustainable and circular lighting. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, and there's interviews and stories every week. So I recommend that to you. Well, I would say that, wouldn't I? So onto the topic at hand, just to set the scene for those not familiar with the sort of construction interior process. At shell and core stage, that's when before it gets let. And then if you look here, the first stage is Cat A, and which the developer wants in order to get the building let and to get it into a finished state that is attractive to prospective tenants. And I would contend that this image of Cat A here is atypical in the sense that most Cat A's would have a suspended ceiling, and this one has an exposed ceiling, and I would argue is a rarity in the business. There's also a big trend towards Cat A plus. Cat A plus is where there is an interior fit out of sorts, and this is more aimed at multi-tenant spaces. It's more attractive to new companies, startups, etc. And then of course we have Cat B, which is when a client takes the whole floor, number of floors, the whole building, and they commission their own people, their own design team to create a bespoke interior to suit their brand values, etc., etc. And in that transition, Cat A luminaires can get taken out and end up in the waste stream, which is what we're trying to avoid. So that's basically the issues that's setting the scene. Most Cat A fit-outs don't look like that previous picture. They look like this in the sense they have a ceiling, they have a raised access floor, and they have lighting. So this is typical Cat A, I would argue, and this is what we want to avoid. The City of London, I would contend, is probably a hotspot for Cat A fit-outs and for this problem. And of course, this is what we're trying to avoid is where we've got Cat A's and downlights, etc. But also a lot of linear stuff as well coming out, even LEDs coming out. In fact, we estimate that it's our best estimate is 100,000 luminaires are removed every week in the UK. That's 5 million annually. Just 7% are currently recycled. And key points, one key issue is that manufacturers don't want to take back luminaires unless they're upgrading them. And that's something we see every week on Recolight when we get calls from people who are having luminaires removed. We often get in touch with the manufacturer to give them first dibs on whether they want to take them back or not. And they will only take them back when they're doing an upgrade to LED and there's some revenue in there for them. They're not geared up, a lot of them, for taking back material, storing it, etc., etc. It's also quite clear that any removal cost, and we're taking out luminaires carefully, that needs to be costed and needs to be in the plan. And the suggested typical cost of that is £10 per luminaire, and how that works is something that is yet to be worked out. But there's clearly no silver bullet for this problem, short of a ban. So we need to look at more creative or a range of measures that would typically ameliorate the problem. So why now? After we've had Cat A, I would suggest an American import, probably the late 70s, 80s really got going. So it's been around for quite a long time. So why now? Well, I think there's a sort of a mood across the industry that we're talking about Cat A, about sustainability. We've got all our measures, and every company's got a shiny document about their aims and values and sustainability. Well, this is something that is standing out like a sore thumb, the Cat A issue. But whose responsibility is it? That is a big challenge. If you look down the supply chain, you have the developer, property developer. You've got the money guys who put up the financing for a lot of these, and they have ESG requirements. They talk a lot about that, but when does it become real, and when and how does that work? You have ESG funds, but it can often be financing buildings in which Cat A products get taken out. A key in the supply chain is people like Wakefield and JLL, etc. And they're very keen that prospective tenants see a clean interior and ceilings and floors, etc. And they would argue here that they're competing with other buildings, etc. So, and then you've got the tenant.
We seem to have lost Ray's audio. I know Ray was having problems with his Wi-Fi. So what I'm going to suggest is that we move on to our first speaker, and hopefully Ray will be able to join us later on.
Comes in, law firm or consulting or services. There's no incentive to here. Can everybody hear me okay? Because my internet is a bit unstable at the moment, but I'll plow on.
Ray, we lost your slides and you stopped sharing, so it's whether we go straight to.
Okay, let me just give me a second. I'll just hotspot if that's okay. Yeah. So bear with me. I'm going to try and record.
Should we go on to Flav?
Yes, I think there's obviously a problem with Ray's Wi-Fi at the moment. So Flavie, maybe if you could switch on your video and share. Thank you.
Ray, we were going to switch to Flavie, but if you're hotspotting now and you're fine, then we'll carry on.
Yeah. Where did you lose me here?
That one, yeah.
This one?
No, the one after.
Oh, here. Okay. Apologies. Yeah. Apologies for the loss of service. So yeah, I was talking about the final tenant that comes in. Typically in London, in central London, it would be consultancy services, financial services, legal services, etc. And they bring in their own people, their own design team, and often they don't know or think about what's happened to the Cat A fit out that they came along and saw when they did the viewing. And then you've got contractors who are not incentivized currently to do anything with luminaires that come out of a ceiling. You've got the architect along the way, you've got lighting designer, and you've got the luminaire manufacturer. And I would contend that there's nobody really along that whole supply chain who is currently losing out or in any way, and therefore is incentivized to deal with the issue. You've also got the regulators, and currently there isn't an environment in which one could foresee government or departments stepping in on this issue. Could naming and shaming be a way, or companies becoming increasingly concerned about their reputation? Is that a possibility to affect change? Maybe. Another problem is we don't really have a best practice. We don't know what best practice looks like. We've got Cat A plus, which you could argue is one route, but it's not right for every tenant and every installation. Could you examine buildings using VR? Letting agents are pretty much against that. Could we normalize reuse and somehow incentivize contractors to take out luminaires, and we could get them packaged up carefully and reused? That's something that is being talked about. You've got currently, an increase in the number of take-back schemes where companies will even pay to take back some of the previous luminaires or give credits. Could that be somehow a business model that affects Cat A? We've also got mobile upgrading units. This is stone lighting in Scotland. So we're seeing lots of initiatives and lots of interesting developments. And could some of these be applied to the commercial office environment? This is a leisure sound. Well, why am I showing a swimming pool when we're talking about offices? The reason I'm showing this is because this is one of the first buildings in which a raft of luminaires were taken from one building, taken down, refurbished, upgraded to LED, tested, warranted, etc., and then put in another building. In this case, the client was the same. It was Edinburgh Leisure. This is Ainsley Park in Edinburgh, and 40 high bays were taken out of another location, Gracemount, and stripped back by egg lighting, and then put back. And they estimate there was a 40% cost saving by doing it this way rather than with new luminaires. This is the Entopia building in Cambridge University, and here they've actually taken luminaires from a completely different client in a completely different location. So luminaires from the City of London, 350 luminaires taken out, refurbished, upgraded, etc., tested, warranted, etc., and then installed up here in Cambridge. Another issue that luminaire manufacturers are looking at, and is a possibility and could be an exciting future, is could we have luminaires that are designed for Cat A but can be upgraded and reused when they go to Cat B? So could you have end caps? Could recessed luminaires become suspended luminaires? Could they be reconfigured to be connected, etc.? And I know that some manufacturers are working on that, and obviously the industry would welcome any innovation and creativity in that world. And obviously there's pricing issues, etc. So, but that could be an interesting idea in the future. And finally, I want to give a plug to a competition, a design competition that Recolight is running in conjunction with the Institution of Lighting Professionals. And this is the idea behind this is to come up with designs for repurposing your typical Cat A 600 by 600 modular. And it doesn't have to be lighting, but what could we do with these? How could we repurpose those? And I think it's a great initiative. It won't be launched. I think it'll be launched next week on the Recolight website. So keep an eye out for any publicity of that. And the ideas that come from it, we will talk about and show at Circular Lighting Live in September. So that's just setting the scene. I'm now going to hand over to Flavie, and I'm going to unshare my screen, and hopefully that will all go smoothly. So Flavie, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ray. So my slides.
Yes, that's fine. We can see that.
So yeah, well, thank you very much for inviting me today to this webinar. So my name is Flavie Lowers. I work for the finishes and interiors sector as their sustainability champion.
Flavie, your audio is a bit patchy at the moment. I don't know what's wrong.
Okay, let me just try to move closer to my computer. Can you hear me better?
That's better, yeah.
Okay, let me just try to do that. So, there you go. We have we've set up a sustainability leadership group within the FIS, which is composed of a number of our members. And the aim of that group is to support sustainable transformation and a net zero approach within the finishes and interiors sector. Now, what I think is really interesting is that since I joined the FIS, which is over 18 months ago, the number of members who want to attend those meetings has increased on a regular basis. And so the interest in sustainability is becoming greater every day. So what we do in that group is we've identified a number of key projects. So for example, we've been looking into what does defining sustainability in the sector mean, and some topics that were identified are around social value, packaging, resource efficiency, but also circular economy and net zero, which are related to the topic that we mentioned today. We do run webinars like Recolight on a regular basis, and always happy to hear about some good examples of what's happening in the industry and raise awareness of what the members need. But we've also got a great focus on waste and Cat A fit out in particular. Yesterday we had an industry day, so that was with our members. Our membership consists of contractors, specialist contractors, but also manufacturers, distributors, and many others as well. And yesterday it was an industry day very much for the contractors, and we had a great interest in the attendance and a great debate around whether Cat A is required and what could be done in order to improve it. But we also have been very much exploring the idea of reuse initiative, and that's something that is an ongoing work. The reason why we care, I mean, Ray touched on some of these the issues, but I mean, in general, the construction industry is responsible for about 50% of all resources extracted, about 30 to 45% of all the waste that are being produced, 50% of the greenhouse gas emissions, and of these 50%, there's 10% that's related to materials. So it's a very significant impact. And we often refer to the figure of 300 tons of fit out materials that goes to landfill every day. I mean, the impacts are huge, and surely there's some things that we can do. The reason why the impact is so big is because we really very much take an approach, a linear approach in the way we do things. We extract some raw materials, we manufacture products, we install them into projects, we use the buildings, then we reach the end of the life of the space, and that might be every 5 to 7 years in the fit out sector. And then obviously the end of the life of the building. And as Ray mentioned, there's a huge number of stakeholders involved into all the different stages, and sometimes different stakeholders at the same point in these projects. There's waste generated all the way through, from surplus materials, because labor is more expensive than materials, so it's cheaper to overorder and then dispose of the materials, put them in a skip. Waste from the strip out, waste from demolitions. Cat A to Cat B is a real kind of interesting topic, because a lot of the time when we talk about circular economy, we talk about the transition from, so the demolition of an existing building and transition to a new build. But actually, we would argue that the fit out is, because it changes every 5 to 7 years, the impacts are very large and should not be ignored by any means. But actually, the Cat A to Cat B transition, I'm not going to explain what those two are because Ray just did it, is even more puzzling, because that might just be weeks, and I might actually be kind, it might just be days in some cases. And what is crazy about it is that the products that are installed into Cat A buildings are quite often taken out of the building before the end of their service life, because they will be taken in order to set up for a Cat B. And sometimes some of these products have never been used. I mean, surely there is something that we can do in order to improve that process. So this is where circular economy comes into play. So circular economy can refer to a number of different aspects, but in general, for me, it's more about how do we do more with less. So some of the good practice that could be done is maybe look into taking stocks of the materials. So whether it's between a Cat A to a Cat B transition, so before you go to the Cat B, just do you take stock of the materials. That's what we call a pre-fit out audit. So that's where you identify the quantities and the types of materials. So you do a visual audit, and you establish where those products could end up and how they could be reused in the most efficient way, with a focus on reuse. So that's something we've been working with our members, and we've been creating a best practice guide that will be published very shortly, based on the work done by the Chartered Institute of Waste Management, who have published their code of practice for pre-demolition audits. but we've created one which is more specific for the pre-fit out, for the fit out sector. So that's called a pre-fit out audit. And we very much focus on best practice and focus on reuse. We've also got an Innovate UK funded project called Link, where we're looking to use artificial intelligence to accelerate the identifications of different products, but also to gain better quality information on the products that are being identified through this pre-fit out audit. Because it's a bit like when you buy a sofa from IKEA or Habitat, and it's new, and so you know you have all the information and the details. But when you want to buy it on eBay, it's sometimes difficult to even get a good quality picture. So having the right information in order to be able to inform the people who will be specifying the products is quite important. What happens is that once you've done your fit out audit, what could happen is that ideally the product goes back to manufacturers. After all, the manufacturers are the one that understand their product the best. What we find is that actually it doesn't happen very often. But we have seen some examples of new businesses that are being created and have set themselves up specifically to take back some specific products, clean them, test them, issue a new warranty, and sell them again. And there's a big attraction in buying these new second-hand products, and that's driven mainly by the carbon agenda, because your reclaimed products will have a much reduced carbon footprint. What we find is quite often after a pre-fit out audit, some of these materials are being listed onto platforms, and they end up going to the charitable sector. So that's great, and that's a great output, and it's better than sending them to landfill or recycling. However, this is very much on an ad hoc basis, and really what we want to see is that this is done more widely. So now, so the next slide is the list of platforms. So what we've identified is there are many different platforms where you can list the products that come out of a Cat A or a strip out of a Cat B, or at whatever stage. You can start listing products onto some of these platforms. So we're going to publish a full list of these platforms on the FIS website quite soon, raise awareness that these platforms exist, and that's a really good start. As I say, really what we want to start to encourage is to take those materials, put them back into a new building. And what is often mentioned is the issue of timing. So the idea of having the chance of having the right materials at the right place in the right time at the right quantities are quite small. So what we're looking at is whether we can explore the idea of creating some storage space where the products can come out of a space, put into storage, and then you create the volume, and then you redistribute them into new buildings. Other initiatives that we are currently developing is the concept of a pre-cycle agreement, with the idea that when a manufacturer makes some claims that their product can be recycled or can be reused, then we can validate those claims. And then on a project by project basis, they can then set up an agreement with the end user and say, right, so these are the conditions for us to take back those products and to do whatever with them that is required, as stated on the declarations. And these are the conditions. So this is the transport, who's going to pay for the transport, how do you deconstruct our product and segregate and repackage and etc. So all this information that is often quoted as being an excuse for not doing the recycling or the reuse is taken away to some extent. But I think what's really important is that we need to change. And why? Well, Broome has been around for a little while, and it's a building assessment schemes, and it's growing in importance. There's more and more buildings being certified every day and assessed every day. So as a product manufacturer, if you can demonstrate that your products can be reused at the end, or you can take it back, then that is beneficial. The Construction Leadership Council have got their Construct Zero initiatives. They do talk about designing out waste. They're talking about low carbon materials. They're talking about circular economy. And quite interestingly, at a local level, you've got the the Greater London Authority, who requires at planning stage that a circular economy plan is put in place, and also a carbon footprint of the building and the projects, to demonstrate that if a building is being demolished, it's a lower carbon solutions than to refurbish the existing buildings and to put it and to improve its performance. So circular economy is certainly something that is very high on people's agenda. There's a lot of clients who also have made some strong statements and requests. So I've got Grosvenor as an example, who published this document, Think Zero, and they are looking to measure the carbon footprint of all their developments. And they've set themselves up some ambitious targets. They also want to work with the supply chain to reduce their organizational carbon. Looking into public procurement, if you look into the construction playbook, which is the government guidance on sourcing and contracting public work, the previous version that was published probably in about 2020 had a token mention of sustainability, whereas the one published in 2022 was all of a sustainability. I think this is not something that's going to go away, and I think it's something that is important to pay attention. Yesterday we had an industry day, as I said, and the appetite from the contractors to take on reused products is huge. We had a poll and we asked them whether they would take reused products on new projects, and 100% of the answers was yes. So I think this is very encouraging. So anyway, I'm going to pass on to the next speaker, May. So let me just stop sharing. Yeah, over to you, May. So you're on mute.
Yes, if you just turn your microphone on, May.
Apologies.
We can see your slides. Great.
Yeah, great, fantastic. Well, thank you, Flavie. Right, so as Ray said, I'm taking this kind of more from an interior architecture perspective. Yeah, so Cat A, it's something I think historically we've been all used to. When you talk to any tenant or any prospect client moving into a commercial space and ask them what they expect when they do the walk around to pick a building, this is what they expect. Basically, raised access floor, they expect ceiling tiles, or nowadays maybe potentially moving towards kind of exposed services in certain buildings, certain parts of London, and lighting already fitted. So blank canvas, a box with essential services and basic finishes. And although this has been historically the way people perceive and see the Cat A, there are certain other ways that we can look at, and this is potentially what I'm going to be talking about today. So why Cat A? If you speak with landlords, it is, in their opinion, it is something that attracts tenants. It's walking around the shell and core potentially is not the same as walking a floor that has got ceilings and flooring. It makes the tenant feel that it's a ready to occupy space. Having said that, I'm a bit cynical about this because the space is not really ready to occupy. It has got the infrastructure, but you still have to do a whole process to get ready for occupancy. It offers flexibility. Again, you know, you've got a space that is completely open, completely bare and empty, and all it has is your services. So some air conditioning and some electrics and lighting. So it offers flexibility for the future fit out. Having said that, again, you know, thinking of the counter argument, it does offer you the flexibility, but you know, if you take it as a shell and core, potentially have full control over that process. Standardization and consistency, it is something that I think is in landlords' side, and it's basically for their own benefit. So it means that each and every floor will be fitted the same. So when you perceive the building from the outside aesthetically, you can see the building all looking the same. They all have the same ceiling tiles, all the same type of lighting. therefore it's kind of easy and it's a standardized approach from a landlord perspective. It's consistent, instead of kind of giving every tenant their own kind of the reign to do whatever they want. Having said that, again, the counteract to that is if you have a very good written policy to how you would like your space fitted for the tenant, the prospect tenant, I think you can overcome that problem as a landlord. Competitiveness, and I think that played a huge role in why the Cat A has been popping around all of those buildings in London. If the building next door is offering it, it would be seen as disadvantaged not to have that as an offering. And again, that's a historic mindset where that's what tenants expect. Potentially thinking about sustainability, it could be a competitive edge not having the Cat A fitted altogether, because then we're not wasting material, we're not putting the Cat fan coil units and mechanical services in the wrong locations, and therefore that competitive edge of if they are doing this, I've got to do the same and I've got to compete, maybe is slightly changing, or hopefully that's what we're trying to push for, to change that mindset. And then the reduced management responsibility. So because the Cat A would be done by the landlord, it's kind of the landlord's responsibility rather than the tenant's responsibility to maintain the system. So in a way, it offers less management responsibility for the tenants, which can be attractive for some of the tenants. What are the factors that impact Cat A? So if you start looking at how the Cat A is designed from a design perspective, there are certain things that really impact how that Cat A should look like or would look like. Location and market demand. So as I said, where the building is, and Ray talked about this in a sense that most of the buildings that have Cat A would have metal ceilings. And kind of certain parts of London, exposed services is not quite the look they would ask for in, let's say, the city, the financial district. And you would expect to have a particular look for the Cat A. So that kind of location would definitely dictate what kind of Cat A you're getting. The target tenants as well, if you're targeting some startups, you would have a different look to what you would have if you're targeting professional financial institutions per se. So there's always differences in how you what your target market is expecting, target audience is expecting. And then there's also the financial consideration, and that plays a huge role. So how much money is being invested by the landlord in the fit out, and the rate of return on their investment as well. So how much are they letting the space for? And that actually plays a crucial role in the selection of what lighting goes in, what ceiling tiles go in. And in a way, it could kind of cause some compromise along the way. So as a tenant, you have no control whatsoever to what is the quality of the Cat A you're getting. And it's all dictated by that financial consideration the landlord is looking at. The local market, as I said, it's your competitors, the buildings around you. If they're doing that model, then you feel that you're peer pressured by them to do the same model, and therefore you kind of fall into that. And then sustainability, that's a really huge big factor that impacts Cat A, and I think that's what we are kind of talking about in the panel today. If sustainability is high on the agenda, is Cat A a good option? Having those ceiling tiles in at day one, which maybe do not suit the particular layout that the tenant is coming into to take, that space, and they have their own Cat B and aspirations, does it suit them? Does that mean that day one they move into the space and the first thing they do is to take out the whole ceiling? And then what happens to that ceiling? And would anybody else take it back? Would the manufacturer take it back? So I think the sustainability angle is actually a good big driver to make us think a bit more about why we're putting the Cat A in, why we're putting it in this particular manner, and is that the right approach? What are the disadvantages? I think there are so many disadvantages to the Cat A. I know at the beginning, one of the advantages announced were the fact that it can be flexible. In my mind, as an architect, it limits your customization of the space. So the number of times I've walked into a space with a client where we're looking at their Cat B, who they are, their values, their brand, and what they stand for. And we have a very clear vision of what kind of space we'd like to create for them. And then you walk in and the building they decided to take, let's say, has got 600 by 600 grid, which is a very standard grid, luminaires everywhere. and it's a white box, it's white blank canvas, and potentially it might not be suitable for the look and feel or the design we're doing. So the first thing we do is a section, a portion of that Cat A fit out that was just brand new and, as Flavie said, never been used, is taken down. Ceiling go down. We start cutting into the ceiling grid. We start taking luminaires down, so perhaps the luminaires are not the right look. Maybe we're aspiring for a completely different look and feel for the services, maybe expose them. So then you have a whole array of a ceiling that you don't know what to do with, all brand new, but then nobody's ready to take, and you're not the only one doing it. A lot of people are doing it. So therefore, there's so much of it available and there's not much uptake. So that limits your customization in a way. You always think about, right, okay, I need to keep it where it is, but then maybe take sections of it. So it makes the space compromise from day one, unless you are really prepared to take the hit and take the whole thing out. But then you think about sustainability, especially if it is big on the agenda of the designers or the client or both. It causes delays and program risk. The number of times that this has happened where a landlord is putting the Cat A fit out together and fit out contractors are on site, the client can't get the space and they cannot have the handover on the date because there are delays in the landlord program. So therefore you can't do much. You have to wait for the landlord to finish the fit out, commission it, and then hand it over to you. So that could cause risks to projects, and especially if the project has got a tight program, which happens a lot of the times. If there's a particular deadline that the tenant would like to hit and walk into that building and start kind of using the space, that could cause some compromises. Higher tenant fit out cost. As I said, we're throwing things that are fully functioning, and you would have paid for that as a tenant. So whatever fit out the landlord is doing within that space, that charge has been passed on to the tenant. So in a way, you're paying for the fit out that has happened, and then you are going to pay for the fit out that is about to happen to take it from Cat A to Cat B. Limited design input from the tenant. Hardly any tenant would have any views or any decisions on a Cat A that was put in the building that they are willing to move to. Even if they view the building early, even if they are kind of early on board with the landlord, I think for them to make any changes or have any control over the fit out is close to none. That doesn't happen very often. So therefore, you can't really decide what lighting you would like to have because the whole building will have a particular look. It's been designed, it's been procured, and the contractor is nearly ready to get it all fitted out. So therefore, you're kind of paying for it, but you don't have the control. You also don't have the control over the quality. So let's say if you are aspiring for a well space and you would like to go with human-centric lighting as an example, you don't really have much control. So you inherit what you inherit, which could be very budget driven and not quite the type and the quality of lighting or ceiling tiles that you require, or even air conditioning, mechanical services that you require, but you still, you take it as it is. You do not have control over that. And then, of course, generating more waste. And that's the biggest issue. Tenant comes in, vision gets built, and a lot of materials get wasted. So what if we ditch the Cat A model? What are the disadvantages? Occupiers will have to know that their Cat B fit out will take a little bit longer because we're now installing the mechanical services from scratch. We're installing, a raised access floor, we're putting the electrics in, we're putting the mechanical services in and lighting in. So of course that will take a little bit longer. I think it is something that we've seen, especially over COVID, easy to implement and easy to get used to. So we were used to certain lead times pre-COVID and pre the Ukrainian war, and now working with supply chains, we realized that things are taking a lot longer to be delivered to the UK, Brexit as well. So I think building that extra time within a program, as long as you are aware and you have the awareness of it, I don't think it causes too much problems. But of course, it is a disadvantage that, your fit out is going to take a little bit longer and the space is not 100% ready. It's shell and core. Higher tenant fit out cost. And that's kind of something to look at from a long-term perspective, in my opinion. So of course you'll be paying more to install mechanical services, lighting, electrics, etc. But at the same time, you know, the other side of the sword, the other edge of the sword is you already pay for these, maybe potentially as a service charge or as part of your tenancy agreements or your rental over the course of the period. So I think that kind of counteracts it. So if you're not thinking financial year and you're not thinking about this particular project you're doing, I don't think there's a huge amount of difference. But if you're thinking only financial year and project cost, of course the project will be slightly higher in cost, but you could save on the actual tenancy itself. So the lease agreement itself could be lower in value. And then inconsistency. So the landlord will have to live with the fact that everybody brings in their own vision, their own ideas into each and every floor. So that could be a disadvantage from a landlord perspective. What does it offer as, you know, for advantages? It offers quite a lot, actually, especially coming from an interior architecture perspective. Flexibility. Imagine walking into a space where you have control over every single thing you put in, from a specification perspective, from the type of products you choose, from location and positioning. The number of times we've had to position certain rooms in a particular location just because we're trying not to clash with the mechanical services. We're not trying to incur costs by moving the mechanical services around or readjusting the luminaires in the right location. It causes us compromise. So the flexibility of actually, you've got the space and you can create whatever you want within that space without compromise. Less waste. We're not going to be wasting as much because we're not taking down ceilings. We're putting exactly what we need. We're procuring exactly what we want and what we need. And we're not ending up with a huge amount of waste that we don't know what to do with. And of course, more control over the quality. So every tenant will have their own quality aspiration, what they're trying to achieve within the space in terms of sustainability aspiration, well-being aspirations, and you can integrate that. You have control over the whole process, from what it is as a shell and core all the way through to the, you know, the pens you put on your desks. So it gives you a lot more control, and control, of course, will drive the quality. And then, of course, the design opportunities is another advantage. So the number of opportunities that, you know, could be explored from an architecture perspective, I think we can become a lot more creative if we have a shell and core space, and, you know, the sky's your limit. You can design with freedom. Are there any alternatives available? I think there are. So virtual reality, and it is something some landlords started exploring. So using virtual reality to actually demonstrate how the space could look like, not just as a Cat A, potentially as a Cat B as well. So if a tenant kind of is marketing their building, and if they allow for the virtual reality kind of prospect to be part of that marketing material, then the tenant would walk in, they would put on the goggles and walk around the space, look around the space, and they can see it finished. And I think that helps, because some of the counteracts or some of the conversations that I have with some of the landlord clients I work with is, but people can't imagine it. And if it's looking really kind of rough and raw, it's quite hard to imagine. So I think that kind of elevates and help take out that risk, and you can get people to kind of look at the space and see the opportunities. And because it's not physically building it, you can actually show multiple ways of doing the space, and perhaps that opens a lot more opportunities. And a digital simulation as well of the space. You can do a fly through, walk through, and then it gives a better idea of how the space can look like, and also the potential opportunities that could bring, in a sense that you can show multiple options. You can develop it with a tenant. You know, you can develop how the ceiling looks, how the space is divided, in a far much more interactive, engaging way. So you get a lot more buy-in from a tenant. And then on a very kind of non-techie version, you could do a mock-up space. I don't know why we have to fit out, you know, 28,000 square foot or worth of a floor plate on each and every floor. Maybe we take a small area. We take an office, a marketing suite, and we show some of those ideas of, you can have this ceiling or that ceiling, this mechanical, you know, fan coil unit or that system, this light or that light. And I think that kind of limits it. So you're still building a physical mock-up that people can walk into, but on a very smaller scale without the waste. And again, giving people some opportunities. So I think it is a mindset shift, and we have to look at things differently and to encourage people to think about why Cat A and do we actually need it? We need to talk about the environmental impact, and Flavie and Ray both mentioned some really good stats on how much waste is actually produced by the Cat A model. Well, Cat A and Cat B, the fit out model, full stop. But if we can reduce the amount of waste by taking out or designing out the waste from the Cat A, I think that would help. Discussing the sustainability benefits as well, and how that would help with any certification the client might be aspiring to get, having that control from day one rather than inheriting a building with everything that it hosts, I think, again, will present a lot of opportunities from a sustainability perspective. And potentially do a commercial comparison. I think sometimes it's very hard to see past this financial year where we are delivering that project and we have a budget that's signed off. But if we do a commercial comparison across the many years that the tenant is taking that space for, it could potentially encourage the fact that this is a good way to look at developing spaces, and from a landlord and a tenant perspective. Declare the carbon benefits, which is huge. Those ceilings that we take down and we recycle or take to the landfill, we've got quite a bit of embodied carbon within the building, within the fit out. And by taking it down, you're not getting that benefit of the embodied carbon. So declaring the carbon benefits, I think, would be ideal, especially with the government's kind of direction towards less carbon. I think that needs to be considered. And then showcasing successful examples. And we've worked with a client before where they were looking at the buildings and the potential buildings that they could move to. And we were helping them kind of analyze the buildings from an architecture perspective. And it was very obvious that they wanted a space with no ceilings, all exposed services, all the mechanical services on show. And they eliminated every building that had ceiling because they were aspiring to be quite sustainable with their fit out. And that kind of made the decision a little bit easy. So every building we walked in and they had, Cat A fit out already done, they were like, it's not for us, we're not doing this. So I think if we showcase more successful examples where tenants are not put off by the fact that the fit out is not created up to a Cat A standard, and they are fine to take spaces that are shell and core. They can imagine it, they can see themselves in it, and they see the sustainability benefits behind it. I think that would help shift a lot of landlords' mindset. It will take out the peer pressure that we talked about, that, if the building next door is doing it, I feel that I need to do it. So that would definitely help, by showcasing a lot more of those successful examples to encourage more people to do it that way, which is a lot less wasteful. And that's the end of my deck. I will pass you on to Fran, who will be discussing a lot more about what they do.
Thank you very much, May. I'm just going to share my screen. There we go. You should all be able to see that now. So yes, thank you very much. My name is Francesca and I'm here today to talk to you about our new lighting donation portal. Some of you may have heard of it. It's called Circular Place, and the aim is to aid the redistribution of lighting products within the industry. But as well as that, we're really keen for Circular Place to help with closing a loop on used luminaires and avoiding waste where possible. Reducing recycling is key, and we feel that this could be a huge part of helping towards that, as well as stimulating reuse. And not forgetting responding to climate emergency as well. Here you can see a picture that I'm assuming that most of us would have been quite familiar with. Unfortunately, luminaires being taken out of sites and then ending up in the recycling plants, waiting to go through the process, or in this picture, going through the process itself. But what I'm here to talk to you about really is the fact that where possible, we want to try and prevent this even being the case. We understand that often it is, but we also know that sometimes it doesn't have to be. So for example, these products could have potentially been reused. And if they weren't reused, they could have been repaired in situ. It's just something to bear in mind. So with Circular Place in mind, we've decided to present two opportunities to the lighting industry. First one being the reuse of used lighting. Currently, there isn't that much product that is currently reused, but we feel that this is potentially because it isn't readily available within the industry. And we want to try and make it possible. So even though there isn't much reuse, we're hoping that used lighting can be in fact reused, because a lot of it is in good condition still. And actually, until it's taken out of sight and popped in a skip, often not with much care, it is fine. So here at Recolight, we're presenting the opportunity to our members to have their fittings taken from site that are in good condition that still can be reused, to be transported to a remanufacturer within the UK for them to be reused. We're hoping that this will in fact help this. And the second opportunity we're presenting through Circular Place is the redistribution of new, also known as surplus stock. So we're aware through our members and through producers here in the UK that a lot of them have tons of space taken up in their warehouses, around their head offices, full of surplus stock. Stock that's in good condition, can still be used and made use of by many, but unfortunately it isn't something that they're selling at the moment, or it's not a product line they want to push any longer, but the product is there. Here at Recolight, we would like to encourage those producers and manufacturers here in the UK to actually join our portal and add as a donor, donate those products on the system for reuse. We're hoping that through doing so, we can find new homes for these products that are actually great and have got a lot of life in them to those who need them. So what are we doing and why are we doing this? Well, ultimately, we can see that our producers have a real problem when it comes to used lighting and surplus stock. So the idea of Circular Place is to make that more accessible. So preventing waste from being generated in the first place, that's key, because ultimately we're reducing waste straight away. Because instead of good new stock going through the recycling process, if we can rehome this stock, we're already helping a small bracket, yes, but a bracket nevertheless of preventing waste. And then we've also got used lighting. People often think that when products are coming out of sites, they are no use. But I think everyone here so far, Flaving, Ray and May, have both spoken so well about products that actually are in site, but only for a short amount of time, literally so that somebody can turn on the lights. So what we're proposing is that products like that in the Cat A fit out, for example, or used lighting that's been in products in a site, for about 5 years or so, still has so much life in it. In fact, those products can be uploaded onto the portal and others can view them with the potential of either reusing them as they currently are, or alternatively using them for remanufacture. So in turn, we would encourage as many remanufacturers in the UK as possible to join the portal, because it's through this portal we're connecting them to so many opportunities here around the UK. So really and truly, the purpose of Circular Place is to connect. It's to solve a problem where we've got used product and we've got new product here and available, but not being used. So Circular Place will connect those who have products to donate and connect it with those who are recipients who have a need. So I love when I see this logo. Suzanne here at Recolight created this logo for Circular Place. And it's a logo that I'm really, really passionate about. Why? Because here at Recolight, yes, we created it, but I'm hoping that it isn't going to be something that we see just at Recolight. It's going to be something that we see throughout the industry. Because ultimately, once we see it throughout the industry, we know that we've done what we aim to do when we set up Circular Place, and that in fact is to spread the word, and spread lighting around the industry, around the UK. So Circular Place itself. Well, so this is the inside of Circular Place, and for me, this is very exciting because I've seen it from the beginning. Ultimately, inside this system, a producer, a donor, a manufacturer can enter into the system and upload product that they have. So in this case, let's say I am the donor myself, so Fran, and I've got some track lights, some LED panels, and some floodlights that I would like to pop on the system for donation. And it's a really simple process. And we've made it really easy because we understand there's a lack of time and opportunity to be able to get these things onto the system. So we wanted to make it nice and easy. So the first thing you would do is go along to create a product, and you just be asked for the product name, a brief description of the product, and then a few key details, for example, the quantity of the product that you have that you would like to donate, the weight of the product, and then any other information that you feel that could be beneficial. But what's great about this system is that actually you don't have to spend a lot of time typing through everything about the product. You've got a specification sheet and you've got images of the product, you can just upload them onto the system. And therefore, it means that any recipient who's interested in that product at first glance can say, yep, I'm interested in those track lights. I would like at least 80 of them, and there's 100 available. I can go on, look at them, and then look at the specification and gain all the information about the product itself. And as I've got displayed here, you can add as many as you like. But what's brilliant about this, which I think a lot of manufacturers and producers around the country will love, is the fact that they are able to pick how long they would like this to be on the system for, a bit like an eBay. So you can go on and you can put on the date, how long you'd like it to be available. So you know, say, for example, after August, you have not any longer got space to hold this stock. That's fine. If you put it on the system, it means that anybody looking at these products know, okay, this is the longest they're willing to hold it for. I'm interested, and you can open a conversation with them about it. Now, as well as having a create product section, we also have the option to add batches. And just to explain roughly what a batch is basically track lights, LED panels, and floodlights all put together on a few pallets that have been shrink wrapped and ready to go. But the difference is that the producer might know the quantity that they have available, but they've got them on multiple pallets. And they just haven't got the time to open them up and take them apart and separate them, let's say. The batches enable you to upload all of that product together, which means it saves the producer time and the recipient will be able to gain multiple items at one time. So now I'm just going to move on to another viewpoint, and this is from a recipient's view. So a recipient can enter the system and view what's available. So in other words, what the donors have put onto the system. And they can see what's available, the date it will be available until, and also the amount of product that's available. And then they can just click view, read the specification as mentioned earlier, and decide if it's what they want. And if it is something they want, they just have to click and say, yes, I would like this product, and how many they would like. And that request would then go over straight away to the donor of that product, and they would then say if they accept the request or not. At the point where the donor says they do accept the request, then the two companies' details will be exchanged. And at that point, they can liaise with one another to sort out the logistics and packaging, etc. And so this next screen is another look inside the system. But here we've actually got, for example, the used lighting in action in one site and the used lighting that's just come out of the ceiling. And this is exciting because this is looking at the viewpoint really from a contractor who's gone in, seen what's coming out of site and thinks, I'll put that on the system and see if there's anybody who would go to make good use of it. And then, for example, a remanufacturer could spot these products and say, this is brilliant, I've been looking for this, I can see the quantity that's available, I can see how long they're going to be at site for, and I'm aware that they're not out yet. So I've got time to start planning. Planning is very much key for a remanufacturer. So this is another viewpoint and another way that the system will make used lighting more readily available. So how can we make this work? Well, this has been touched on quite a lot through this webinar already, but ultimately it's the same for that of which Flavie mentioned and May mentioned. Everybody has to really be involved. You have to get everybody involved. So not just stakeholders, but we need the contractors. And that's why I was so happy with the poll that Flavie mentioned earlier, because the fact that she's done this poll and the contractors are so engaged and so open fills me with such joy, because it shows that there is potential and there's so much opportunity here for this to be so very successful. And along with that, the fact that contractors are open to being more kind and considerate when taking care of taking products out of sight, which is brilliant. But as well as that, we need the original donors and the recipients to also be very transparent with information. So very good at communicating, adding information that's appropriate onto the system and sticking with the times that they've put on. And when liaising with one another, respecting one another's time. In regards to the compliance of the products, it's also key to remember that the remanufacturer will be taking on the responsibility of the compliance and the warranties going forward. And I hope it's something that actually means that donors are more confident at donating products via the system, because ultimately it's only through donation that we can allow this process to move forward and for it to be successful. So it's really important that our producers and our manufacturers here in the UK are open. And if they have any questions, that they reach out to us and discuss it with us, and we'll be more than happy to guide them through the process and also explain to them step by step how the system works and the recipients of those products that they decide to put onto the system. And producers are really powerful in this process, because as well as them being willing to donate, which we hope that they will, we also need to remember that they have a lot of product that's currently out in the environment, out in office, out in shops at the moment. And when these products are coming out of sites, where are they going? Well, ideally, we would like them to be reused, remanufactured. And so we want them to be willing to either take back their own products in the first place and then enter them into a reuse process. Alternatively, if that isn't something that's an option for them, which we appreciate won't always be the case, that they are open to potentially allowing others, such as remanufacturers in the UK, to be able to take the products and do their best with it and remanufacture it and pop it out back into the community for reuse. As well as producers, specifiers have a brilliant opportunity, because specifiers get to speak to clients every day. They get to find out what they want and what they need. But ultimately, they also have the opportunity to be able to educate them and persuade them about reuse and remanufactured products, in order for us to create more of a level playing field between new product and used products. So why should you join this initiative? Well, I'm going to change it a little bit. Why should you invest in a system like this? Why should you donate? Why should you join in? why should you consider being a recipient? It's been spoken so well via Ray initially at the beginning of the webinar. And then we had Flavie also talking about it, and May. So ultimately, we're aware of the reasons because we've already listened to them speaking about it. Ultimately, it's to reduce the amount of waste so that we don't have to keep on pulling as much raw materials unnecessarily, because the materials are here. And actually, instead of us pulling new raw materials, we need to really engage and think, what's out there? What can we use? Well, the products that are coming out currently are in good condition. That's what we should be trying to use. And then obviously, the donation of new products is a great way for us not to be wasteful. There's a lot of charities that would be able to make good use of these products, but as well as charities, there's companies that would prefer to use products that is available, that is brand new. Ultimately, is surplus to one, but not surplus to somebody else. And in addition to that, climate change. I mean, I think I could probably speak for the rest of the webinar and some on climate change, but ultimately, if we don't make a change, we all know that the world that we currently have won't be the same. So it might seem like a small change to donate and then for somebody to be a recipient and for the reuse process to happen, but ultimately it's huge. This is just one industry, and if we can do this, so can the others, and then we've created a massive change, and that's what I'm hoping. So just quickly, if you would like to get involved, which I hope many of you will, please do contact us at Recolight. Feel free to give us a call, and we'd be more than happy to talk about the process and the donation portal in more detail, or email us at the email address here on the screen. Otherwise, we look forward to launching Circular Place at the end of June. We'll be sending out lots of information via social media to explain to you all how it works, and let you know that the launch date is here. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Fran. I can feel the passion for this project from your presentation. If I could invite all the participants and panelists to join us back on video. Nigel, you must be pretty excited about Circular Place and what it can do.
Absolutely. I'm hoping this is one of the ways in which we can address the Cat A conundrum, is actually making information about what's coming out available to those who might be putting it back in elsewhere. It's that simple.
Okay, well, we have some time to take some questions from our participants, so let's tackle some of those. First from Roxana Rakshani, who's a senior lighting designer at Condell. Her question is quite simple, really. Do we need lighting for Cat A at all? May, I would say that. Do we need lighting?
Do we need
ceilings?
Cat A at all? I think would be the question. Lighting is a good one, and ceiling is another good one. I think lighting and ceiling is probably one of the elements that you would really want the designers to take the rein on. And one of the things is Cat A gives you very even light, right? So it's a certain lux level across the whole board, across the whole floor. When we design, we do not design in that way at all. There are certain typical light levels for certain typical functions, and they change accordingly. So as a straight answer, I don't think we do. And if you ask me personally, I think raised access floor could stay. It could be a shell and floor model, but definitely a ceiling and a lighting layout needs a lot of control, and it needs to follow the design intent, and it needs to follow the requirements, the functionality of the space, how it's being used. So in my mind, I don't think we need it.
And we should give a shout out to is it RMF, who the raised access floor company has taken back a lot of their products and doing that. So that's an interesting model in that. May, seeing as I got you on, is a suspended ceiling cheaper than an exposed ceiling where you need more higher quality sort of visual sort of services?
In many cases, when we talk about it, and if the mechanical services are already present in a space, it is very expensive to actually take the ceiling down or put a new ceiling rather than actually get the services kind of looking great. So to get the service to look great, to be exposed, you need to spend an element of money to get the coordination right, to make sure that the services are tidied up, neatly done, made to be exposed. So both models cost quite a bit of money, and I think having the services exposed would be cost neutral to actually buying ceiling and installing and procuring and putting the ceiling in. So in a way, it's an even option. It's just when you have it, when you inherit it, that's when you will be. So let's say the client wants an exposed services, and we have tiled ceiling. So you open up the ceiling, you waste the tiles, you waste the lighting, and then you realize that you need to do a lot more work on the fan coils. You start even wasting those to put something in. That is the most expensive model when it hasn't been designed that way, and you want to bring that element in.
The reason I ask is I'm presuming the lighting industry would find it way easier to deal with exposed ceilings, and there's much more flexibility there, I would imagine. Tom,
flexibility.
Yeah, Tom Riddell, who's lead remanufacturing engineer of Egg Lighting, who I name checked earlier, is asking, how can we influence bespoke product design for Cat A fit outs to prevent products not being reusable? Nigel, I'll give that one to you. How can we get lighting manufacturers to come up with, products that can be reused? Is there a way we can do that, drive that, create a market for that?
I guess it's about them seeing that as an opportunity. And once they see it as an opportunity and it's a way in which they can gain competitive advantage, then I think that they're likely to do that. And so it feels in some ways an intractable problem, because there are so many different stakeholders involved, and you put the nail on the head at the beginning, Ray, when you said, well, nobody's losing out because of this. And so what we need to do is to flip that around and make it so somebody will gain because of changing it. And it could be that it's manufacturers who come up with better solutions. I mean, either, as May said, perhaps we don't need Cat A at all. But if we do have Cat A, or we have Cat A just on one floor or a part of a floor, coming up with solutions that might involve lighting as a service, or buyback, guaranteed buyback, or willingness to supply product that's already been remanufactured, so the embedded carbon is lower in a Cat A fit out. There are a number of different solutions out there. It's a matter of converting those into opportunities, into profit opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Flavie, would you come in on that in terms of, there must be people in the raised access floor industry looking at that company that's been very successful at designing raised access floors, no adhesives, it's all designed to be plug and play. They've clearly got a commercial advantage, and others will follow suit, and the same could happen in lighting.
And I think actually what's interesting is I don't think that's their product initially. It's a manufacturer that manufactures those kind of systems, and they've seen it as an opportunity to create a new market, really. So I think it's something that is important to consider. I think that there's more and more of contractors that are very, very keen to look into how they can reuse products. The main drivers, as I say, is net zero. Most of them have made commitments to become net zero by whatever date, and where they really struggle is to control the emissions related to their supply chain. So if the supply chain can provide them solutions to reduce that carbon, then they really like it. And what was interesting in the conversation that we've had with contractors over the last few months is that before everything was driven by money, but actually, somebody yesterday mentioned, he said, well, carbon is still a junior player. But I was interested to even hear it being a player, because actually, we'd had this discussion maybe even a year ago. That wouldn't even have been a consideration. We're seeing more and more projects where products are being reused, and mainly it's driven by the carbon agenda. So it's very encouraging. It's I think what we need to do is start bringing the carbon value. I think it was it you, Francesca, who mentioned something about measuring the carbon and talking about the avoided carbon. I think it's becoming quite important.
I wonder, as you know, the whole life carbon assessments that are due to come in across the EU, be interesting if you count Cat A in those calculations, and if there was a benefit to you to not have Cat A.
Right, that's what we need, a benefit to not have Cat A. That is because of the carbon consequences that will really drive change.
And it definitely needs to be calculated. It's part of the fit out. It's like a fundamental part of the fit out, and actually the most wasteful. Well, I say the most wasteful. Cat B still is wasteful because of the kind of how quickly the turnaround is within the commercial properties as compared to any other property really. But yeah, I think it definitely needs to be calculated. It is the start of the fit out, so it needs to be calculated. Otherwise, we're getting some really the figures wouldn't really stack up, and we're missing a big part.
Kevin Shaw is asking, lighting designer in Edinburgh, asking, so far we're not talking about lighting design targets for Cat A. Can we discuss whether task lighting levels across the entire floor is appropriate even for Cat A? You spoke on that before, May, and
yeah, it is not at all, and more so now, because maybe 20-30 years ago the office used to be a stack of desks and people sitting at computers the whole day. It's not the case anymore. It is really changing, and with various environments, with the advancement of audiovisual tech in general, the lighting you need for each space has got to be tailored for this particular space, for the function that takes place in that space. And therefore, having a unified lux level across the whole floor is definitely not what we design. It's definitely not what a lighting designer would advise a client to do in any space. So in a way, it's kind of quite wasteful to start off by assuming that this space is going to be all the same level.
Just a comment really from an anonymous attendee. Another Cat A issue is landlord's requirement to reinstate the Cat at the end of the lease, or pay a large sum. That's dilapidations, I presume they're talking about, May there.
Yeah, and that drives me personally absolutely mad. The whole idea of you take it, you change it, you put it back to what you didn't want, and then somebody else takes it, they change it, they put it back. And it's like, where does it start and where does it stop? It's a vicious circle.
It's comical. So you take it, sometimes at a dilapidation, you must say a Cat B, a very high quality Cat B fitting with bespoke luminaires and all the rest of it, getting taken out, and they're reinstating the low quality. That is madness. I'm sorry, there's no other word for that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And a lot of the times, what one thing gets discussed across the table is, do we store them? And then the end of the conversation is usually store them for 10 years. No, we'll just buy them when we move over. And it's just really it is a model that is broken. You just talking about it here, you see how broken the model is.
It's nuts. It's nuts. Francesca, tell us a little bit about Circular Place. What's the take up been like among your members, and what's the sort of interest been there? Have people got products ready to roll on it, or what?
Yeah, so even though Circular Place hasn't gone live and won't do until the end of June, we have had uptake. We constantly get emails with donations, and we reach out to recipients on a list I've got. So a known list I send out frequently, information to those that we feel may be able to benefit from product that's come to light. So yes, even though the system isn't currently live, the process itself is happening.
I had one question, which is, if you have a charity or an NGO or any organization who says, or I'm not a remanufacturer, but I want to take some luminaires, I want to save some money, I want to do it for sustainability reasons, whatever, and they say I'll take 50 of those luminaires, they're buying something that's unwarranted, and therefore they're taking the risk unless they get somebody else to come in and do some sort of testing and warrant. They're getting an unwarranted product. Is that an issue?
So some will find it is. However, all of the charities that we've worked with, they all do their own pack testing anyway. So they have that as a process that they actually make sure that they do all of the checks that are required. So if they choose to use the product exactly how it is, then normally 9 times out of 10, there isn't a problem because they're prepared to do what it takes anyway to make sure that the product is up to scratch. However, at the point where the product is donated, that donor will always say that at the point when it was originally produced, it followed all of the requirements that were needed at the time. And normally that is enough, knowing that the charity will then do their part too.
Because we want to encourage producers to be able to offer used stock, but to offer used stock free of charge and then to have a warranty issue is painful. And so to offer it on a basis of, you know, it was compliant when it was placed on the first placed on the market, but the liability transfers to the recipient is a reasonable way of handling that.
But you see remanufacturers as being your primary recipients, correct?
Not necessarily. I mean, a difference between new product and used product. New product, it would not necessarily be remanufacturers. It might be a very wide range of recipients. Used product, yes, more likely to be a remanufacturer who's going to do the extra work, because it may well be that you need to convert to LED or do something else more fundamental before being able to put it into service.
Do we sort of ban? I was listening to some letting agents talking about this, and the problem that they had is, the guy, if I have a building with shell and core, I'm trying to sell it or even a bit of it, there's going to be a building they're going to see later that afternoon, the prospective tenants, that has Cat A, and psychologically it's going to attract a higher premium rent and will be more attractive. So, would we support a complete ban? May, I'll come to you first. Would that work?
I'm not sure whether it is a ban as such, or whether it's a conscious decision that take the space until we get to the ban. I think conscious decision of take the space that will basically follow your needs, that will fulfill those requirements that you need. And as much as we do appraisals for architecturally for buildings, sometimes there isn't a single building available, with all the requirements that the client needs in terms of size, in terms of location, that has the option of actually maybe you could take it as a shell and core or a shell and floor. So in a way, I think it's opening up the conversations that we're prepared to take that floor, absolutely no problem. We see the point and we see why we could pay the same money, because it works for us, and it's not going to waste our time taking things down. It's not going to waste our money, and it's not going to be a compromise, because the number of times, and I can say that this probably happens with every project we take from Cat A to Cat B, there is a certain wall that we have to move slightly to make sure that we're not hitting the fan code, and hence kind of compromising your sizes slightly. Maybe not an 18-person meeting room, make it 16 or 14, because if we hit the fan code unit, we're moving it, we're spending money on something that's not necessary. So I think, yeah, before a ban, I think we need the mindset to change, to take what works for you rather than what looks attractive, because in all cases you're bringing a whole construction team on board to take it to what you need. It's different with a Cat A plus, so I think with a Cat A, yeah, take what you think works for you.
Flappy, you were agreeing with that, I think.
Yes, I would agree, and I think before a ban, there might be some kind of different aspects that we can improve in the meantime anyway, and kind of, as you say, you've mentioned it kind of creates it smaller spaces and everything, but that refitted to a Cat A fit out. But actually, just kind of thinking about the initiatives that Francesca was talking about, actually using some of these products for the Cat A and then putting them back onto the market, then why not? I mean, at least you're not putting those, you're just giving those products a second chance and a third life, and etc. So we just need to kind of be a bit more conscious about kind of the way we use resources. You don't need everything to be new every time, especially not for something that's not going to last very long anyway. So I think for me, it's a real opportunity for these spaces to become receivers of the products that Francesca is talking about.
Is there scope in this area for sort of, you know, a new business model, a creative business model where things are leased, or somewhere there's sort of rafts of ceilings are put in and then reused in other buildings. I mean, I heard about a building in central London, 70 floors, all 70 floors had a Cat A fit out, and are gradually getting removed as tenants move in. Well, some floors anyway.
Yeah. I think one of the things that would probably help is a place where we can store products, because there's an issue about where you put the materials and the products, isn't it? And you know, with all good intention, if the manufacturer, you know, the work is in London and the manufacturer is in Yorkshire, for example, you probably don't want to send the product all the way up there and to kind of bring it back again. It's probably better than to bring it from, you know, another part of the world. But you know, if we could keep things local and kind of create a few storage spaces around the country where we can actually stock reused products, then that would be really good. That would help with a lot of different aspects, because even somebody who want to reuse some products in their own building from one space to another, they can just donate the products that they've already got, put those into the storage, and pick the stock from someone else. And you know, it doesn't matter; it's still the reused products. And
Nigel, very briefly, we're beating by the clock, but Nigel, there are moves on storage, aren't there? The sort of initiatives exploring options.
Yes, absolutely, and you know, very often, when product is coming out either from a building or from you know, a manufacturer's stock, so it's either used or new, the decision to dispose or to discard is taken very quickly, and suddenly you've got to find a recipient very quickly, and storage space would absolutely break that that urgency of it's available now, but it's only available for a week, because after that I've got new stuff coming in, and actually I have to have the warehouse space, end of. And so storage space would certainly help that, and we are certainly exploring that as a way of breaking the log jam to allow circular place, which Fran talked about so eloquently, to then help to connect people who actually want the kit.
Yeah, I know those calls you get, and they're definitely, you've got to be out by Friday. You know, 12,000 luminaires got to be taken out. So anyway, right, on that note, we've come to the end of the clock. Interesting topic. I'm glad we had a dive into it today, and it's not going to go away, and we'll discuss it again, certainly, probably at Recolight Live in September. Our next webinar is a deep dive into your obligations and responsibilities of manufacturers, importers, and distributors with regards to WEEE and other waste legislation, and that is at 11 o'clock on Thursday, 22nd of June. So that's a date for your diary. Remains me to thank our panelists for their time and expertise and sharing their insights. Flavie, May, Francesca, and Nigel, thank you.
And thank you, Ray, for hosting, as always, so professionally and thoughtfully. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you. And we'll see you all on the 22nd of June. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.